Adding to our round of exposition is speaker 4523 and the oration, "If it bleeds, it leads."
This round contains material potentially disturbing for some audience members. That trigger warning is the first thing I hear 8 a.m. on a Saturday in a musty classroom surrounded by 5 teenagers and 1 disgruntled parent. One by one, we perform. The first performer was trafficked. The second was sexually assaulted. The third's mom overdosed. The fourth's son was murdered. The fifth's a gay Icelandic drug mule. Then me. My dog died. I loved Chewbacca. Woof. Well, just your average round of traumatic interpretation. But, could be poi, even debate, where dead bodies on the flow equals the W. But why so much trauma? We want the one. Welcome to Survivor Forensics Edition, where you outcry, outdie, out-trauma your competitors. That round mirrors our cultural compulsion to commodify trauma. Whether it's showbiz or trauma talk, cultural scholar Nancy Miller warns we're addicted to stories of pain. And our trauma culture, they sell tickets or win trophies. After all, if it bleeds, it leads. Clinical social worker Olga Molina explains trauma dumping. Unloading traumatic experiences inappropriately for validation is systemically rewarded, creating high demand. Speech and debate is a reflection of society, and as a performative activity, has become a trauma dumping ground, where commodifying suffering is the norm. Bold claim? I wondered too, but there was no research on trauma in forensics. So last semester, I conducted a statistical analysis on attitudes towards trauma in speech and debate, currently under review by the Journal of Argumentation and Advocacy. Of the 417 responses from forensicators nationally, 70% confirmed they've written about or performed traumatic work, and 61% agreed it's required. Consequently, speech and debate has become an unwitting incubator for a broader cultural obsession with fashioning trauma as a product for gain, not healing. It's time we confront our trauma culture, the causes, effects, and solutions of commodifying trauma in our community. Because as future leaders, we must wield our voices to heal society's wounds, not fester in them. As I strut to the causes with questionable grace, I'm supposed to make a clever pun denouncing trauma. Honestly, though, scarring pain makes for an entertaining story. A NSDA final stage story, documentary-worthy story, Oprah-worthy story. So, for maximum impact, we exploit trauma. Take former forensicator, comedian Hassan Minhaj, who misrepresented ethnic trauma to sell tickets. In speech and debate, like society, trauma earns social capital, trophies, scholarships, admission letters, or a Netflix comedy special. Because, as Times critic Parul Siegel explains, Trauma's become a source of moral authority. It's a passport to reward, which sacrifices legitimacy for marketability. If we suffer too much, we're damaged. Not suffering enough, unworthy of the spotlight. We must be just broken enough for the final stage. This reveals our problem's core cause. Utilizing trauma wins. Though our intent may be passionately advocating for critical causes, there's no debating the competitive incentive. In the study, 72% of respondents agreed portraying trauma is a prerequisite for competitive success. The vast majority of oratories from the NSDA final rounds fit the definition of trauma dumping. Mine included. I felt compelled to tell a heart story on my experience with harassment for a shiny trophy. And in my mind said, congrats, your pain is commercially viable. Yes. I'm not alone. We're not bad people. We're just conforming to a convention. But when trauma is your avenue to value, it becomes your value. How often have you been around thinking, oh, they're good, but not shocking enough for the one? I have. Our judging practice of ranking suffering encourages an arms race of trauma. A Trauma Olympics here in Des Moines, 2024 and 25. Yay. Only nobody truly wins. One study respondent shared, judges deemed my assault too common, not as moving as others. Your tale must be harrowing, your suffering novel if you want to succeed. Without pain, no gain. Now, let's cross-examine some impact scenarios. A claim for being oh so brave perpetuates the idea that exposing trauma is healing and empowering, as 60% of respondents believe. But it's not. Professor Hamilton of Galloway University counters, performance isn't therapy. Speech and debate, by nature, isn't therapeutic. Picture this. After unloading your pains, your therapist, instead of counseling you, ranks you 1 through 6 based on how your pain compares to their other patients. RFD, listen, Linda. You're a train wreck, but not enough of a train wreck. Speech and debate isn't the place for children to process trauma. Being judged by your trauma is scarring. Psychologist Cara Manley reveals trauma dumpers and their audience actually relive trauma. Researcher Julie Salverson furthers, trauma-heavy performances reinscribe victim discourse. Incentivizing performative trauma subverts our community's mission by traumatizing and disempowering. Sounds improbable? I've lived it. Last season, my poi on American child marriage received numerous ballots saying, programs with more trauma hit me harder, so ranked higher. Portraying trauma seemed the only way to be heard. So round after round, I graphically enacted sexual assault. I didn't miscalculate and advanced to more final rounds. But performed pain is still pain. Enacting it can wound or worse. One respondent confessed, I tried to kill myself because I felt forced to perform my trauma. In speech and debate, We can exhibit our own suffering and try on others like costumes, but can't undress the lingering hurt. Though our contention is, we are a voice for the voiceless. Portraying the trauma for the sake of drama hinders advocacy. By routinely witnessing trauma, we become desensitized and feel exonerated from further action. Competitors can view trauma-heavy performances as advocacy and judges their ballots as allyship. But Professor Nikki Yahoba of San Jose State affirms social change requires more than making trauma visible. It requires future leaders stitching wounds closed. So, as debaters say, what's the plan text? We must mend our culture of trauma, beginning with you, fellow competitors. Reflect on the stories you tell, knowing you don't owe it to anyone to graphically depict trauma or represent your own. Discussion of traumatic topics isn't wrong, but you don't have to be a contestant in the Trauma Olympics. Please tell your story and how we recover. Your duos on rape culture? In your intro, offer solutions or resources so your audience can act. Then, speech and debate is truly a platform for advocacy. Additionally, to avoid traumatizing audiences, include appropriate trigger warnings, but not just before you speak. Join me in advocating for a change to tab software. Provide a space for descriptive trigger warnings. That way, our captive audience, judges, can request a different ballot, avoiding re-traumatizing triggers. See me after round. I'll be over there somewhere. To sign a petition, making forensics a safe place for everyone. But to transform the incentive structure, the root problem, will take you, coaches and judges. We ask for comprehensive judge training that prizes our activity's heritage, rich characterization, and compelling argumentation over trauma dumping. The role of your ballot then becomes rewarding excellence, not trauma. Affirming suffering isn't a spectacle. Unraveling trauma culture begins with this conversation. Forensicators must speak truth to power in a way that remedies the plights we discuss, not echoes them, so that our rounds will reflect the society we seek, one where we can lead without having to bleed.